Check 1, 2. Okay. Welcome to Zola Writes Jokes. I'm your host, John Makes B. Today I'm going to write 5 jokes from scratch. Now, I'll be trying to make sure that each one has a good 2-story structure with a setup and a punch. And there's a link to what I mean by 2-story structure. But I'm not going to try to edit too much beyond that, because editing as you write can turn into a little bit of a trap. Now, obviously, we want good story structure or good joke structure in the jokes. But the most important thing as we're doing this is to keep the ideas going. You can sort of edit yourself into a standstill. You know, like you start getting into your mind about like, well, is this good? And is that good? And is it good enough? You know, we want good structure, but let's not edit too much. So write jokes now, let the jokes rest, edit them later once you have a little bit of distance from them. I'm going to try to talk through what I'm thinking as I write these. Hopefully you'll feel inspired to write your own. That's the idea here. You can modify these jokes if you want. You can even tell these exact jokes as I write them if you want. I don't mind, and I'll probably never know. Thank you so much to the patrons who support the channel. I would love to have you join these fine folks. Lots of material on the Patreon, including a 30-day bootcamp series called Comedy Zola's 30-Day Joke Garden. That's free for patrons. Give that a look. We also do regular joke writing streams on the Discord channel, so that's something you can join too if you wish. And Discord's also a great place to get help on material that you might be working on. So come on by and give it a look. Okay, so today, what I'm going to try to do is sometimes I have some ideas for jokes in my mind. You know, when you get into a regular habit of writing jokes like this, I find that the more I'm sort of in the swing of things, the more likely I am to just be walking around and think of a joke. But what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the Reddit called News of the Weird. And the reason I'm looking at this particular Reddit to try to think of some ideas is that they filter out the political stuff. Now, I do follow politics. I'm very up on all that. It's just, it's not that funny because it's so dangerous. I'm trying to find something else. So straight away here on the News of the Weird, there's a news item about a TikToker finding a decomposed body in a hoarder house they bought at auction. Guess I got to call the police, that person says. Now, I will say that here's something that I found. I used to do a live show a long time ago that was based around news items. And the idea was, it was kind of like an Onion style show, but the idea was it was an improv show, and I would read, a headline, like a News of the Weird style headline, and say, how did we get in this position? And the improvisers would come up with a scene to show how we got to that headline. I found with like funny headlines, if you actually read the article, it becomes a problem, because the headline is usually, headlines are super clickbaity. And if you read the actual article thinking that, so like if you read one of these headlines and you think to yourself, okay, I'm feeling like there's maybe something there. Let me go and read the article so that I have a better sense of the story, and maybe I'll get more inspiration from that. The trouble is that the headlines are usually really clickbaity, and the text of the article is usually not that funny, because usually what you find behind these News of the Weird items is people with no access to healthcare, people with no access to medical care, people in extreme poverty, that kind of thing. So that stuff is not funny. So, I feel for those people. Absolutely. I'm not saying that they should be dismissed because they're not funny. I'm just saying, as you're trying to write jokes, usually the headline, the clickbaity headline, is better than the text of the article, because the text of the article often includes a lot of misery. So just letting you know. So a TikToker finds a decomposed body in a hoarder house. So yeah, there we go. Okay, so a lot of moving parts here. I bought a house at auction, was owned by a hoarder, totally full of trash. At the bottom of the trash, we found a body. My wife was like, we should call the cops. But I thought, why? This guy's already been shot. So my joke here is that the cops like to shoot people, which they do. But the trouble is there are a lot of moving parts. So like the first story of the joke is all of this. So the first story, the 2 stories of a joke are the first story, the story the premise tells, and then the story that the punchline reveals was there all along. So the story that the premise is telling is that I bought this house and there was a body under all the trash. And the story that was there all along, the twist, is that cops shoot people a lot. But the trouble with the first story of this one is that it's so much. There's the house at auction owned by a hoarder. totally full of trash. And I'm saying totally full of trash because I feel like I need to explain what a hoarder is, but maybe you could try taking this out. I bought a house at auction, was owned by a hoarder. Yeah, I guess you could take that part out because we got it here at the bottom of the trash. Now, something you can also do, I have trouble with jokes like this sometimes because I feel like, I think it's a little funnier sometimes when the other people in your life have the quips, you know? Like, so this joke, but I thought, why? This guy's already been shot. So this joke ends with me being Captain Clever, but he'd already been shot. So this way, it's my wife who's being smart and funny instead of me. I don't know. It seems a little bit more authentic when other people are being, because a lot of people's jokes will end with them being clever all the time. But I was like, what? They'll end with that person being clever all the time. And after a while, it just feels like a narcissist talking about their life. You know what I mean? Bought a house at auction, was owned by a hoarder. At the bottom of all the trash, maybe all, little pause here, because he'd already been shot. Okay. So that's a little long. It's a little long. What about that? I bought a house owned by a hoarder. Now we're down to 3 lines at least. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit short. All right, I'm going to call that good. Now I realize that I realize I'm doing a fair bit of editing here. But I'm also trying to kind of talk through the process. You know, I could just have left it in its first state, and that's maybe what I would recommend that you would do, is just get the idea out and get it kind of good and then move on to the next idea. So don't break your momentum and don't let yourself get into that sort of that pace of like, well, is this good enough? Is that good enough? I mean, you can hear me saying those things, but just watch yourself when you're doing it, because the worst thing is when you ask yourself all of those questions about are things good or not, and then you get to this position right here where it's just you and a blank page, and you're kind of paralyzed and you don't want to write anything because you're already editing in your mind. Is that good? Is that good? So we'll just try to get ideas out. You know what I'm saying? So let's see. Guilty over 4.8 million pound gold toilet heist. A woman admits trying to sell human toes regurgitated by dogs. Feels like that feels like a lot of it feels like a lot of parts to the story. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all those in. A self-driving Tesla crashes into a wall painted to look like a road. So that'll have to start with, if we do a joke about this Tesla thing, we'll have to kind of explain we'll have to explain a little bit of the story. And for that we want to use this. Let me see if you can see it. This is Joe Toplin's book, Comedy Writing for Late Night TV. Let me get that in frame. Joe Toplin. The part that you want to read is on page 53, right here. It says the 3 parts of a monologue joke. And the idea that he goes through is you have a topic, you have the angle of the joke, and then the punch. So let's try, we'll do a Toplin style joke about this. So like all of your monologue style jokes is what this will be. So the topic, now this sucks because I'm having to start here. Did you guys see that video? Did you guys see the video of that Tesla that crashed into a wall? I got to think of my angle. So let me just write this down here. There we go. I'll put a link to the book in the description. Did you guys see the video of that Tesla that crashed into a... the trouble here is, I think the point of the video was to show that because Tesla made the choice to use video for its driving, like self-driving stuff, instead of LiDAR, it's not able to tell the difference between a giant picture of a wall that has a road painted onto it. I don't know. Nothing's really coming to me here. What if we start over? It's an obvious... Roadrunner, like Coyote and Roadrunner reference here. Not sure if anybody even knows what that cartoon is anymore. Yeah, I'm not coming up with anything. Here's a news item. The Virginia Zoo responded to rumors of an escaped gorilla in Norfolk by confirming that not only were all of its animals accounted for, but the zoo doesn't even have any gorillas. The Virginia Zoo released a statement saying the rumors they let a gorilla escape were false. Not only were all their animals accounted for, but the zoo doesn't even have any gorillas. And the letter was signed, sincerely, a human man who is not a gorilla. How long? The Virginia Zoo released a statement saying the rumors they let a gorilla escape were false. Not only were all their animals accounted for, but the zoo doesn't even have any gorillas. All right, here we go. Tennessee man shot by his dog while lying in bed. Man in Tennessee was shot by his dog while lying in the bed. The man apologized profusely, saying, "I didn't even know my dog was police." Police are shooting a lot of people today. All right, this is dumb, but it's the kind of joke that I kind of like. We'll see what you guys think. The TSA found a turtle. The TSA found a turtle in a man's pants at Newark Airport. The man defended himself by saying, "Look, they're actually his pants. You got the wrong guy. They're his pants." A couple were forced to sit next to a corpse. A couple were forced to sit next to a corpse on a plane for 4 hours. When they asked for an upgrade, the airline said, "Okay, fine. The corpse gets 2 bags of chips." A little bit long on the punch there. Oh, this is a good one. This is too, well, I'll come back, but it's too, I don't like the way it's coming out right yet. Now they're both pregnant. A man swallowed a bird as part of a fertility ritual and then died. 2 doctors were able to rescue the bird from the man's stomach after the fact. And those doctors are now pregnant. Okay, let's review. No, that's not the first one. I bought a house owned by a hoarder. At the bottom of all the trash, we found a body. And I was like, we should call the cops, but my wife said we didn't need to because he'd already been shot. A man in Tennessee was shot by his dog while lying in bed. The man apologized profusely, saying, "I didn't even know my dog was police." The TSA found a turtle in a man's pants at Newark Airport. The man defended himself by saying, "Look, you've got the wrong guy. They're his pants." A couple were forced to sit next to a corpse on a plane for 4 hours. When they asked for an upgrade, the airline said, "Okay, fine. The corpse gets 2 bags of chips." A man swallowed a bird as part of a fertility ritual and then died. The doctors were able to rescue the bird from the man's stomach after the fact. We need alive in here. Doctors were able to rescue the bird alive from the man's stomach after the fact. And those doctors are now pregnant. Is it funnier if it's the bird who's pregnant? I don't know. I guess I like it a little better if the bird's pregnant, even though that's not, I don't think that's how it works. Are birds pregnant? I'm not a veterinarian. Do birds get pregnant? Okay, so they lay eggs regardless. So they're not technically pregnant, but I don't think we need to go too deep into ornithology for the purposes of the joke. Anyway, there's my 5. These will be on the Patreon. Thanks so much to the folks who support the Patreon. I really appreciate it. Yeah, love to have your support. Let me know what you think. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate you hanging out. I hope you feel inspired to write your own jokes. Come on by the Discord to get, find out when we're doing live writing streams and stuff like that. I hope you're well out there. I hope you're holding on to your sanity as best you can. Try not to get too depressed. Maybe write some jokes, feels good. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and maybe jump on the Patreon if you want to help me make more. And if you want to talk about comedy writing with people who are trying to do it in a constructive way, we also have a Discord channel.